The Guardian Flame, a horror story. The fire was a pulsating heart of orange and gold in the vast, velvet blackness of the woods, its light painting the faces of the 5 teenagers circled around it in flickering shades of amber and shadow. The air was cool and carried the rich scent of burning pine and the damp, earthy perfume of the forest floor. Crickets sang their nightly symphony, but their song felt distant, hushed, as if in reverence to the silence that had settled over the group. A boy named Leo leaned forward, the firelight catching the serious set of his jaw. He reached into the pocket of his denim jacket and pulled out a small, metallic object, holding it up for the others to see. It was an old Zippo lighter, its chrome surface scratched and worn, but on its side, a name was crudely engraved, Hannah. This story, Leo began, his voice a low, steady murmur that seemed to be absorbed by the surrounding night, is called The Tale of the Guardian Flame. It's not about a ghost that wants to hurt you. It's about a fire that wants to keep you forever. This story is about a guy named Mark. Mark was the kind of guy who never said no to a dare. He was all bravado and easy smiles, the first to jump off a cliff into the quarry, the first to explore a supposedly haunted house. So when his friends heard about the old Henderson place deep in the state park, a cabin that had been abandoned after a forest fire had tragically claimed the life of the family's teenage daughter, Hannah, it was a given that Mark would be the one to spend the night there. The legend said that if you went there, you had to bring a source of light, an offering to the spirit of the girl who had loved stargazing more than anything. If you didn't, she'd get jealous. Mark, of course, thought it was all ridiculous. "I'll bring a flashlight," he'd scoffed. "She can borrow it if she gets scared." His best friend, Chloe, had been uneasy. "Just take a candle, Mark. It's respectful. It's what you're supposed to do." To placate her, he'd rummaged through a junk drawer at home and found the Zippo lighter. "See? A permanent flame. She'll love it." The hike to the Henderson cabin was long, and the woods grew denser and quieter the deeper they went. The cabin itself was a sad, charred skeleton. One side was blackened and collapsed from the old fire, but the other side, though smoke-damaged, was still standing. The door hung crookedly on its hinges. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and blood orange, Mark's friends wished him luck and left, their nervous laughter fading quickly into the twilight. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule of loss. The air was thick with the smell of old smoke and decay. In what must have been the living room, a faded, water-stained photograph lay on the floor under a layer of grime. It showed a family, a mom, a dad, and a girl with bright eyes and a wide smile, holding a telescope. Hannah. Mark felt an unexpected pang of sadness. He picked up the photo and propped it on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, which was filled with ash and debris. "All right, Hannah," he said to the empty room. "I'm here. Don't get any ideas." As full darkness fell, the silence became absolute. It was a heavy, watchful silence that pressed in on his eardrums. He turned on his powerful flashlight, its beam a solid, reassuring bar of light in the oppressive gloom. He decided to set up his sleeping bag in Hannah's old room. It was the least damaged room, its walls still covered in posters of constellations and planets. A small, brass telescope stood by the window, pointed at the night sky. It felt strangely personal, and for the first time, Mark felt a twinge of unease. This wasn't a story, this had been a real person. He was just unrolling his sleeping bag when he heard it. A soft, scraping sound from downstairs. Like a chair being dragged slowly across the dusty floorboards. His heart jumped into his throat. "Hello?" he called out, his voice too loud in the silence. The scraping stopped. He stood frozen, listening. Nothing. Probably just an animal, he told himself. A raccoon or something. He took a deep breath and reached into his pocket for the Zippo. He flicked it open. The schnick of the wheel striking the flint was explosively loud. A small, perfect flame sprang to life. And from downstairs, a deafening bang shook the entire cabin. This was the first scary scene, the sudden, violent response to the lighter's flame. Mark nearly dropped the Zippo. He fumbled for his flashlight, which had gone out, and clicked it frantically. It was dead. The batteries, brand new that day, were completely drained. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at his throat. He was plunged into utter blackness. The only light was the small, dancing flame from the Zippo in his trembling hand. He held it up like a talisman. The tiny flame cast long, leaping shadows that made the familiar shapes of the room look monstrous and alive. And that's when he heard the second sound. A soft, sighing whisper, so close it felt like it was right beside his ear. It was a girl's voice, faint and distorted, like a radio signal from far away. "You brought it, you brought the light, asterisk." Mark spun around, the lighter held out before him. The room was empty. The whisper seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air grew noticeably colder, and the smell of old smoke intensified, becoming the acrid, choking scent of a fresh fire. He could have sworn he saw a flicker of orange light dance in the hallway, gone the second he blinked. He was terrified, but a strange thought occurred to him. The whisper had sounded grateful, happy, even. He looked at the small flame in his hand. The legend. The offering. "Hannah," he whispered into the darkness. The only answer was a soft, almost contented sigh that seemed to ripple through the room. For a few hours, nothing else happened. The silence returned, though it felt less hostile now. It felt attentive. The Zippo's flame burned steadily, never flickering, never consuming the fuel. It just burned. Mark, exhausted by adrenaline, eventually sat down, his back against the wall, clutching the lighter like a lifeline. He must have dozed off. The second terrifying scene woke him. He was jolted awake by the sound of crackling. Real, loud, intense crackling. His eyes flew open. The hallway outside the bedroom door was glowing. Flickering orange light danced under the doorframe. The smell of smoke was no longer a memory, it was thick and suffocating, filling his lungs. The fire was back. It was happening again. He scrambled to his feet, coughing. He had to get out. He grabbed the doorknob and yanked the door open. A wall of heat and flame roared into the room, forcing him back. The hallway was an inferno, exactly as it must have been on the night Hannah died. It was impossible. It was a memory made real. He was trapped. He was going to burn alive. He screamed, backing away from the blistering heat, toward the window. But the window was sealed shut, painted over decades ago. In his panic, he looked down at the Zippo still clutched in his hand. Its small, calm flame seemed absurd in the face of the roaring blaze in the hallway. And then he understood. This wasn't a memory. This was a show. A recreation. For him. "You brought the light," asterisk, the whisper sighed again, right beside him. It didn't sound malicious. It sounded excited. Like a child putting on a play for a guest. Asterisk, "Now you can stay. We can watch the stars together. Forever." Asterisk. The fire in the hallway wasn't consuming the house. It was just burning. Contained. A beautiful, terrifying prison of flame designed to keep him in. To keep him company. This was the revelation of the curse. Hannah wasn't a vengeful spirit, she was a lonely one. She didn't want to harm him. She wanted a friend. And her way of keeping friends was to recreate the only thing she knew, the fire that had kept her there. The climax was a battle of wills, not against a monster, but against a deeply tragic misunderstanding. "No, Hannah." Mark yelled over the crackle of the flames. "I can't stay. I have to go home." The fire in the hallway roared higher in response, the heat intensifying. A framed picture on the wall in the hallway blackened and shattered. "Stay," the voice insisted, now sounding petulant, like a child being told to put a toy away. Asterisk, "You have the light. You're my friend." Asterisk. Mark knew with a cold certainty that if he let the Zippo's flame go out, the illusion would collapse. But the illusion was the only thing holding the real, deadly fire at bay. It was a paradox. He needed the flame to survive the very fire it was causing. He looked at the small, steady light. He thought of the legend. An offering, he had given her a light. But maybe she needed something else. With a trembling hand, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out the photograph of her family he'd propped on the mantel. He held it up toward the fiery hallway. "Hannah. Look. This is what you need. This is what you should be holding on to. Not me." For a moment, nothing happened. The fire continued to roar. Then, a change. The flame seemed to waver. The figure of a girl began to form within the fire, a shape of shimmering heat and light. She looked at the photograph. The roaring softened to a whisper. The intense heat diminished. The fiery hallway was still there, but it was now like a painting, a mirage. The entity was distracted, captivated by the image of what it had lost. It was his only chance. Mark took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and did the hardest thing he would ever do. He snapped the Zippo shut. The flame vanished. The world went pitch black and utterly, profoundly silent. The heat disappeared. The smell of smoke vanished. The roaring fire was gone as if it had never been. He was standing in a cold, dark, silent, and perfectly intact hallway. He fumbled in the dark, found the front door, and fell out into the cool, clean night air, sobbing with relief. He ran and didn't stop running until he found his friends waiting anxiously at the trailhead. Leo lowered the Zippo. The fire before him was now just embers. The story was told. His friends sat in stunned silence, the image of a fire that was a friend and a prison burning in their minds. "Mark moved across the country," Leo said, his voice quiet. "He can't be in the dark anymore. He sleeps with every light in his house on. He says it's to keep the shadows away. But I think he's afraid that if it's dark, her light will be the only one left. And it will be so much more inviting." He held up the Zippo. "This arrived in my mailbox yesterday. No package. No stamp. It was just, there." He flipped it open. With a smooth schnick, a small, perfect flame sprang to life. It burned steadily in the still night air, not flickering in the non-existent breeze. And from the deep, dark woods behind them, beyond the circle of dying firelight, a soft, sighing whisper drifted into the clearing. It was faint, filled with a lonely, hopeful longing. "You brought it, asterisk." Leo snapped the lighter shut, plunging them into near-total darkness. The woods were silent once more. "It's not an offering," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's an invitation. If you stayed until the final ember died out, then you felt the heat. You've already accepted the light. The fire is always looking for new keepers. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story we pull from the ashes. Your subscription is a signal flame in the darkness. It helps other listeners find their way to our circle and keeps the deeper shadows at bay. What would you have done in that burning hallway? Let us know in the comments. Would you keep the light burning or risk the darkness? Your choice might just save the next listener. If this story kept you frozen in its glow, leave a like. It tells the algorithm that this flame deserves more fuel, and helps warm other brave souls who aren't afraid of the dark. But choose your next story carefully. Some flames don't just want to be watched. They want to be fed. Until next time, keep a light on.